They smiled as if everything was normal, as if this wasn't a betrayal wrapped in soft tones and expensive perfume. My brother, Jason, kissed my cheek, pushed 2 strollers into my hands, and dropped the line like a joke, "We're heading to Dubai. You're on your own with the kids." And then, he was gone. Just like that. No instructions, no apology, not even a glance into my eyes. I stood there on the station platform, my travel bag at my feet, my fingers still curved around the small candle I'd chosen for Mom, bergamot and cedar, the one she'd light when I was sick as a child. I thought maybe we could talk again, in silence, side by side. Maybe she'd finally realize I wasn't broken, just bruised. But she didn't even come into the station. She waved from the car, a designer bag on her lap. "You saved the day," she shouted through the open window. "I'll call you later. You needed a distraction anyway." I didn't say anything, didn't cry. I just nodded. The 2 children, my niece and nephew, looked up at me, confused but full of trust. One had sticky fingers, the other was almost asleep. They didn't know what had just happened, but I did. My name is Carrie Betancourt. I'm 38, and until that moment, I thought grief had made me invisible. It turns out it made me useful. Useful enough to carry other people's choices. Useful enough to be left at a train station with someone else's children while those who claimed to love me boarded a plane bound for luxury and silence. And I guess they presumed I'd stay silent too. That I'd carry the weight as always, that I'd do as I was told, because that's what quiet daughters do, right? But they didn't know I had a number in my phone. They would never have imagined a name they no longer spoke aloud, Sophia. Daniel's ex-wife. The mother of these children. The woman they said had abandoned them. I'd never called her before, but now, holding her son's hand and her daughter's blanket, I called. The phone rang once, then twice. I didn't even know if she'd answer. I only had the number because I'd secretly kept it the day she was erased from every picture frame in Mom's house. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was cautious, low. I introduced myself slowly. "Sophia, it's Carrie." There was a long pause. I heard something in her throat, like a breath held too long. She repeated my name, carefully, "Carrie Betancourt, from the family." That word hit me hard, family. The same family who told everyone Sophia had left, that she'd spiraled after the divorce, that she couldn't handle motherhood. But the version I got from Sophia that night was different. She spoke slowly, like someone who hadn't spoken this truth aloud in years. Daniel had filed for emergency custody while she was in the hospital, recovering from a breakdown. He submitted false documents to the court, even to immigration. And Mom backed him up on everything, writing letters calling Sophia unstable, dangerous, unfit. They told the world I left, Sophia said, her voice choked. But the truth is, I was pushed out. The pain in her voice wasn't dramatic, it was something quieter, older, like a door that had been closed for a very long time. I told her the children were with me. Safe. There was a silence that I didn't feel. Then she asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "You have 24 hours. My train ticket now has your name on it." She didn't cry, not then. But I could hear something unlock on the other end of the line, something that had been waiting, patient and helpless, for someone to say, "I believe you." I hung up and looked at the children. They were eating crackers from the station bench as if everything was normal. But nothing about this was normal. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt like someone who held the one thing this family had never given me, a choice. I didn't go home. I didn't want my too quiet apartment, the half-finished knitting projects, and the framed ultrasound still hidden in my drawer. Instead, I called an old friend, Brenda, from my law office days. She didn't owe me anything, but she always showed up when I asked. She lived an hour out of the city, in a small cottage surrounded by woods, where no one asked questions. That's where I took the children. They didn't really know me. I was the aunt who sent birthday cards and brought puzzles at Christmas. But they didn't cry. I think they sensed something was different, the way I moved slower, softer, the way I didn't raise my voice, or pull their hands, or tell them to be quiet every 5 seconds. I made them oatmeal, wiped jelly from tiny cheeks, tucked them into a blanket fort on Brenda's couch, and read goodnight, moon 3 times. And when they finally fell asleep, their breathing light and steady, I sat on the edge of the couch and let the silence thicken around me. I should have spoken sooner, because here's the truth no one asked me for. I had known something was wrong with Daniel's story for months. I'd seen the court filings, discreetly checked the court register, just out of curiosity. Then I'd found the discrepancies, the travel consent form with Sophia's forged signature, the withdrawal slips from the children's college fund 2 days after he filed for sole custody. I'd kept all of them. Not because I planned something, but because part of me didn't believe him either. Still, I said nothing. I was grieving. I was tired. They told me I was fragile, that I needed something to hold on to, that helping Daniel's family would give me purpose. And maybe for a while, I believed them. Maybe I thought I had no right to question the narrative when I could barely get out of bed. But now, holding their children, Sophia's children, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just a witness. I was a bystander. And I remained silent because silence felt easier than being accused of disloyalty. So I let them keep lying. About Sophia, about the past, about me. What kind of family builds itself on that? And, more importantly, what kind of woman keeps carrying the weight when she knows it was never hers? Sophia disembarked just after sunrise. I met her at the baggage claim exit, her oversized hoodie pulled down over her curls, her eyes searching for threats, or perhaps ghosts. She looked smaller than I remembered, not weaker, just real. Not the myth Mom had painted. She carried nothing but a canvas tote bag, one shoe untied. Her hands kept trembling, as if she wasn't sure what she was allowed to touch anymore. When she saw me, she didn't run, didn't collapse, didn't make a scene. She just stood there and asked, "Are they really safe?" "They're napping," I said. "Under a pile of dinosaur blankets." They made a fort out of Brenda's couch cushions and declared it a spaceship. Sophia's breath hitched, her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she nodded, like someone who had trained herself to hold back joy, because joy had become dangerous. I drove her back in silence. Trees blurred past the windows. At some point, I told her about Brenda, about the tea, about the oatmeal, about the little one still having jelly on his chin. Sophia smiled, that kind of smile that isn't happy yet, just relieved it hasn't been erased. When we reached the house, she walked in as if she didn't trust the floor. And when her son whispered, "Mama," like a question he wasn't sure he was allowed to ask, that's when it happened. Sophia didn't sob. She sank to her knees, hugged both children, and whispered something I didn't hear. They clung to her like roots seeking soil they hadn't felt in a year. I turned away, not because I couldn't watch, but because something inside me understood I didn't need to. There was no room in that moment for anyone else but them. Later, while they slept again, this time tangled into Sophia as if afraid she'd vanish, I made tea for us. The same mug I'd used the night before, still warm. She looked at me from across the kitchen island and asked, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't have a speech ready. I didn't want credit, or an apology, or redemption. I just said, because someone should have, and no one did. She nodded, as if that was the only answer that had ever made sense. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Sophia had her children now, yes, but Daniel still had the paperwork, the story, the system on his side. And I still had the strollers, 2 pieces of silent evidence they'd handed me as baggage, no questions asked, no guilt, just expectation. And that, more than anything, would become their undoing. That night, Sophia braided her daughter's hair at the kitchen table. The boy was already asleep on the couch, his thumb tucked into his palm, his dinosaur fort now just a sloppy pile of cushions and blankets. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby I hadn't heard in years. I sat across from her, savoring the last sip of lukewarm tea, and opened my laptop. Not for emails, not for news, but for the folder I'd quietly built over the months. The one labeled simply, just in case. Inside were screenshots, bank statements, travel receipts, an audio recording of Daniel caught one afternoon when I'd visited to drop off groceries and he'd rambled, unaware my phone was on the table, recording. It's not like she's coming back. Even if she did, who would listen to her? She has nothing. I have the house, the custody, mom's support, even the church. He laughed. I didn't. I never said anything at the time. I just nodded, went home, and uploaded the file. Because after my miscarriage, I didn't sleep much. And when you can't sleep, you either fall apart or you organize. So I organized. I started reading family court guidelines, started asking discreet questions at the downtown law library, started gathering things people presumed I was too broken to notice. I never planned to use them, but now the strollers were in my possession. Now Sophia was here. And now I wasn't just the woman they'd left at the train station. I was the woman with the proof. I sent the first batch of files to Hannah, my college roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered she worked in immigration law. She called me 10 minutes later. Carrie, this isn't a custody dispute. This is an international custody violation. If your brother tries to bring the kids back without authorization, the State Department can step in. I blinked. Wait, legally? She laughed, not unkindly. Legally. Publicly. Permanently. I didn't ask how she acted so fast. I just said, thank you. And while Sophia read to the children in the next room, I sat at the table and drafted a motion under the Hague Convention. Not because I wanted revenge, but because, for the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was responding. Because they didn't just lie about Sophia. They lied about me. And I'd been silent for so long they'd forgotten I was still listening. But now, I had only just begun to speak. By Sunday morning, Daniel started to panic. The first text came with a smiley emoji. Hey, how are my angels? Send pics. I didn't reply. The second omitted the emoji. The third requested a call. By the fifth missed call, he changed tactics. Hey, slight snag, we'll be back soon. Just keep them fed and happy, thanks, sis. That word, sis, landed like a bruise, as if abandoning a grieving woman with 2 toddlers was the same as asking her to water the plants while you were gone. I still didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sophia's lawyer had already filed the emergency custody request. Immigration had frozen Daniel's return until the hearing. And Hannah had flagged the travel consent form he'd forged last summer, the one he'd slipped past airport security when traveling alone with the kids. Daniel thought this was still a negotiation. But it wasn't. They'd forgotten one thing: I didn't just survive grief, I went to law school. I never warned them, never gave a hint. I let them dig their own hole. I just handed them the shovel. On Monday, he tried a video call. He was calling from the terrace of some luxury Dubai hotel, a drink in his hand, fireworks blooming behind him. Where are the kids? Mom says she hasn't heard anything. I looked at the screen. He looked so smug, so certain. They're with their mother, I said calmly. He blinked. What? Sophia legally has them. He laughed, too loudly, too quickly. You're bluffing. I'm not. And I don't recommend trying to fly home next week. He swore, then threatened, then pleaded. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said. It makes me an aunt who isn't afraid of silence anymore. And I hung up. That night, Mom Patricia showed up at my apartment. No warning, no knock, just mascara running down her cheeks and a voice shaking. You destroyed this family. I let her talk. She said I was ungrateful, that Daniel had worked so hard, that I'd shamed her in front of everyone, that I couldn't possibly understand the sacrifices she'd made for that family. Then, she said, soft but cutting, you never even had a child of your own. That hurt deeper than the rest. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at her and said, you didn't want a daughter. You wanted an assistant. She opened her mouth, but no words came out because, for the first time, I wasn't the one at a loss for words. The custody motion made headlines in our local paper. Not because Daniel was important, he wasn't, but because the story was too strange to ignore. Father abandons children with grieving sister at train station, flies to Dubai. That was the headline. But the subtext was louder, how dare she fight back? My inbox flooded. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, aunts who had once hugged me at funerals. Some wrote, you did the right thing. I had no idea what you were going through. Others were more familiar, you humiliated your mother. This could have been settled privately. But I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't hiding anymore. Because what no one, not even Patricia, seemed to understand was this: 6 months ago, I was sitting on my bathroom floor with a bottle of pills in one hand and silence in the other. Not because I didn't want to live, but because living felt like screaming into an empty house where no one came to check, no one answered my calls, no one asked how I was after the hospital visit, after the procedure. They just said I needed a purpose. Mom went into full defense mode. Church luncheons, PTA friends, charity circles. She started spreading that I was unstable, that I'd had a breakdown since the miscarriage, that she'd had to take control for my own good. But the truth is, once it slips out, it doesn't quiet down easily. A woman named Denise, one of Patricia's oldest friends, sent me a private message. Your mom is talking a lot, but I've known her a long time. I know what control looks like. And that's when I realized, they weren't just trying to silence me. They were trying to rewrite me. At night, while the children slept, legs tangled, and Sophia folded onesies into neat piles, we sat side by side on the living room floor, the laptop open between us. There were folders, voice memos, screenshots, email conversations where Mom told Daniel to act fast, to get Sophia out before she gets smart. Photos of the children at the train station, eating crackers off the floor, no car seats in sight. And there was a name I'd been holding on to. A woman they never saw coming, Amanda, Sophia's cousin, a court-appointed child advocate. The kind of woman who could calm an ocean in a courtroom just by clearing her throat. By noon the next day, Amanda had filed a motion prohibiting Daniel from any unsupervised access until a full custody hearing. By 3 p.m., we had surveillance footage from the train station. At dinner, Mom called again. This time, she was crying. I didn't know. I thought it was just a break. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. He didn't mean to lie. She didn't mean to manipulate. They always didn't mean to. But I finally saw the shape of it. They never meant to love me. They meant to use me. Because I was there. Because I was quiet. Because I had nothing else going on. You traveled with my brother to Dubai, I told her. And you handed me 2 babies as if it were a favor. There was silence. Then her voice, brittle, because you had nothing else. I almost laughed. The grief, the therapy, the effort to feel like a human being again, to her, that was nothing. But now I had the one thing they never expected, power. Not over them, but from them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just sent the final documents. And when the court date arrived, Sophia walked in with a folder full of receipts and photos in her hands. I sat behind her, in black. Not grieving. I wore black so they would know the woman they thought they'd buried never died. The judge barely looked at Daniel. The Dubai trip, the false documentation, the public abandonment. It was over before it began. Sophia was granted full legal and physical custody. Daniel was granted limited supervised visitation, pending parenting classes. He didn't look at me, just stared at the floor as if it had betrayed him too. Outside the courtroom, Sophia turned to me and whispered, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No," I said. "We saved ourselves." And I truly meant it. That week, my mother sent me an invitation in the mail. Gold embossed, heavy envelope, as if it meant something. Family dinner. Sunday, 6 p.m. Let's heal. I didn't go that Sunday. I was at the park with Sophia and the kids, pushing strollers and laughing until my cheeks hurt. We bought lemonade from two kids with a wobbly stand and shared French fries from a paper tray. Healing didn't need a dinner table arranged by the people who broke me. It needed boundaries. It needed truth. Later that month, Sophia moved into a place across town, close enough for visits. Daniel went back to court, this time for tax fraud. Turns out the man who left his children at a train station had left other messes too. And Mom, she never apologized. But she called one night, quiet and tired. "You're really not coming back, are you?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You told me I was fragile, Mom. But it turns out I'm fireproof." And I hung up. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because sometimes revenge doesn't look like anger. Sometimes it looks like no longer being the glue. And never again offering to hold them together. Weeks later, I received a card in the mail. A crayon drawing, two stick figures holding hands. One labeled Mommy, the other Miss Carey written underneath in crooked blue letters. "Thank you for finding my mommy." And that was closure. Not the court ruling, not the headlines, not even the last voicemail. Just children safe, loved, and finally heard. Because, in the end, the greatest revenge is not becoming what hurt you. Thank you for listening to Carrie's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share to support us in bringing you more moving stories, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new releases. See you in the next video.